Good
right,
morning.
hello, we're back. Incredible late summer happening here in
very
the
hot.
UK. It's proper t-shirts and shorts weather.
Yeah.
And stay out of the sun or you get burnt.
Yeah.
So here we are, the end of October, and it's the morning after another session. Very good session, very varied. Sort of for regular viewers, took a few interesting detours. Anyway, we kicked off with a brand new 10-inch from Tony Allen and Jeff Mills. So Tony Allen, the drummer most known for his playing with Fela Kuti and the Afrobeat sound. And this is a collaboration with Jeff Mills, who actually I don't know much about, but sort of I think comes more from the sort of techno field.
Yeah, he's isn't he one of the Detroit?
Maybe he's one of the Detroit techno guys.
Yeah.
So, to be fair, this is very, very new, and I haven't really listened. There's 4 tracks on the EP. We listened to Locked and Loaded, which sounded good, but actually, I think there are better tracks on this EP. A track that came later up that blended real drums and electronic sounded a lot more interesting than this. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there we go.
So from Tony Allen, I just happened to have some Fela in the CD box actually, so we had to get Fela out. And this is from the album called Perambulator. It's basically a whole set of releases in France, I think they were, which doubled up different Fela albums. Nicely kind of done, actually, really. And this is from the album Perambulator, and played the track called Dog Eats Dog, which is a typical instrumental kind of Africa 70 Fela track. Great track, actually. Good.
Starting with the unmistakable Krumar keyboards.
Yeah, a very low rent keyboard sound.
Yeah, let's move you there, John. Right, then, the find of the day yesterday, possibly find of the month, was from a local sort of strange second-hand music and record store in Faversham. Just new in this album, which is an original copy, gatefold copy of Brian Bennett's Voyage, A Journey into Discoid Funk. So Brian Bennett, as well as being the drummer with the Shadows, also a very active session musician and composer. In fact, throughout, up until now, he's still around. I forgot to mention I actually went to school with his son, John.
Oh, right.
Not that that's got anything to do with it. But very crucial. And we listened to a track called Solstice. Fantastic album, this. Sort of very much 1978 sort of synths were kind of just getting more and more interesting. This was a sort of live jam between Francis Monkman, who I think was the keyboard player for Curved Air, if I'm not...
Yeah, I think he did play... No, he didn't play violin, did he?
No.
He was the leader.
That was Darryl Way, thinking of.
Yeah,
Francis Monkman, Alan Jones, who I don't know, on bass, and Brian Bennett on drums.
Great drums, actually.
Great drums, that's fantastic. So yeah, that was a real find. Got it very cheap, and then discovered it seems to be worth hundreds of pounds. So I'm very happy with that.
Don't know if we get bargains like that anymore.
You don't.
Keeping with the proggy kind of end of things, went for Yes from Relayer album, and played the track which is of course called Sound Chaser off there, which starts off with the Crotals, which on the percussion, and a lot of interesting synth playing. Alan White, and this is one of the albums with Patrick Moraz, who I always kind of slightly preferred, I must admit, to Rick Wakeman, really, as a keyboard player. So yes, late 70s, yes.
Great drumming from Alan White.
Great drumming from Alan White as well.
And last session, John had done me a couple of CDs, and on one of the CDs he'd put a track called Aryan's Bag by John McLaughlin, which seemed hugely familiar, and I was just really puzzled as to why I could only find one version of this track. And in fact, it's called something else.
Follow Your Heart.
On the Joe Farrell, which I also have. Anyway, Extrapolation is the album that I got just a couple of days ago that features that track, and it's John McLaughlin's first solo album, and it's absolutely fantastic, featuring again another power trio with it's a power quartet: John Sermon, Brian Ogden on the bass, Tony Oxley on the drums. John Sermon on the saxes. Really fantastic record if you don't have this, and seems to be able to be picked up relatively cheap.
We were saying we actually, both of us, I think, prefer John McLaughlin outside of Mahavishnu.
Absolutely, yeah.
In terms of his playing. keeping in the same kind of period with somebody who at that time, Mike Gibbs, who at that time was based in the UK. He comes from what's now Zimbabwe, but he's based in the UK. And this was an album he did with Gary Burton. Mike Gibbs was one of the number of people who had kind of large bands in the UK. And although this music was commissioned in the UK, it was actually kind of played in the States and recorded Electric Lady. So you've got a kind of big band. You've got people like Mike Brecker, Randy Brecker. You've got Steve Swallow on bass and Bob Moses and people both on drums. So yeah, kind of very interesting, great arranger who's still working now, very active now. Mike Gibbs, actually, most famous I think initially for arranging Joni Mitchell's Paprika Plains. And he's worked a lot with recently worked a lot with Bill Frisell as well. This is a nice album actually from kind of again mid to late 70s.
Well, we got onto a bit of big band flavour here, and again I just recently picked up this on Blue Note, which is introducing the Duke Pearson Big Band, and fabulous gatefold album. To find out what the track was that we listened to. The connection was Randy Brecker, who is taking some very fiery sax solos. We listened to a track called Straight Up and Down, which is written by Chick Corea, but just a fabulous sound, just the huge kind of dynamics and just the power of a big band. And really enjoying this album. Really enjoying.
I think not many people show Duke Pearson on the BBC. He's a great. We're fans of his over here, I think.
Yeah.
Staying big band, but staying British side of things again for me. Mike Westbrook was one of the people who, around the late 60s and 70s, who had a big band. And this is from an album of his called Citadel Rooms 315. And played a track called Construction, which features Brian Godding, who at that time was the guitarist with a kind of prog band called Blossom Toes, who I think you said Derek's been talked about a bit.
That's where I heard about Blossom Toes, yes.
And again features John Sermon, so all kind of connections here as well. But it's a great track, a very, very good, great guitar solo, and a kind of what sounds like a multi-tracked, circular breathing,
fantastic
kind of
ending, actually,
soprano solo.
Really great.
Very good record. This never been reissued as far as I know, and unfortunately quite pricey. This one, I think.
Then something else that arrived yesterday. This is the Over Egging It single, which is The Mongrels, which featured Jason Williamson of Sleaford Mods, and a slice of UK hip-hop with Shoot the Freeze on the other side. Extremely raw and stripped down, and great lyrics. And this is part of a 250 limited edition run that you can pick up from Rough Trade, but you better move fast because this is 107, so they're going quick.
Definitely. Yeah, quite. I mean, a lot of UK hip hop doesn't have that great lyrics, but that really did, actually. Thinking of the lyrical side of things, and I think you already know that Michelle's a big favourite with us over here. This was, I think, her second or third album, called Cookie, the Anthropological Mixtape, and played the track which I don't often play off this, which is called Six Leg Griot, which is the second to last track on it. Great, very, very stripped down kind of sound, mostly bass and drums. Actually.
Fantastic, and instantly recognisable as Michelle's bass player.
And great drumming from Jean Lake as well.
Yeah, really great.
But I mean, all her albums are interesting. This one is probably the deepest funk one of all of them, I think, actually. There's some great stuff on here.
Deep Groove. I think that took us to the new Brandon Coleman release, which is also on the Brainfeeder label. So another of in the Flying Lotus Lewis Cole Thundercat stable. And he is a keyboard player and does a lot of stuff with Kamasi Washington. Clearly very influenced by Zap and sort of P-Funk, and we listened to, and very musical actually, great huge arrangements going on.
Yeah.
And we listened to a track called Giant Feelings, which features Patrick Quinn and Techno Dizzle. But household names. But the new album's called Resistance. Highly recommended.
Yeah, it sounded great. Kind of quite epic sounding for a kind of... and for some reason triggered me to play the title track off David Bowie's Outside album. This is the single vinyl release with excerpts from And it kind of made me think that in many ways, Black Star, which was fantastic, had some precedence, and this album certainly sounds, of his earlier stuff, sounds the closest to it. So it was a kind of a refresh of the relationship with Brian Eno from the late 90s. Kind of very interesting. They recorded hours and hours and hours of material, everything, which are all edited down to one record. But at some point or other, all the other stuff's going to come out, I think. But a great album.
Really great, really
great
sort of
sounding
huge.
as well. Yeah.
So I kind of actually took a different turn. We'd be getting so epic, we needed to kind of calm down a little bit. So this is Crosby, Stills and Nash, the album CSN. And I have to thank Big Star 1000 for sharing this on one of his West Coast Gimme Tens. One of the albums I didn't have. I think I've always been rather put off by that cover, to be fair. But it in no means does it sound as bland as it looks.
Not at all, no.
And we listened to a track called Dark Star, which opens side 2. Fantastic vocal from Steve Stills. And yeah, the harmonies and the playing, Russ Kunkel on the drums, very kind of funky in a sort of laid back way.
You're quite kind of nicely laid back.
Yeah.
I've actually got that record. I'm not even sure. I must have listened to it at some point.
Worth a revisit.
Yeah, and keeping vaguely with the West Coast. Obviously, we've shown a lot of Ricky Lee Jones over the time as well, but this is one I got picked up recently on vinyl, which I didn't have on vinyl. From her album Flying Cowboys, and played the track called Atlas Marker off there, which is the last track, which has got, again, Randy Brecker on it, who seems to be our kind of recurring theme.
Yes.
So, produced by Walter Becker, which was very notable. In a sense, I think it was a record that got both of them out of a bit of a rut from respective kind of pharmaceutical engagements they were involved in at the time.
Yeah.
But it's a really nice record, actually. So I saw her live around this time, and it was absolutely fantastic. Hugely underrated, Ricky Lee Jones, I think.
Yeah, a very sort of solid but unmistakably 80s production, which led me to show this, which I picked up on Friday, actually, again from the market in Faversham for a £5. And this is the Salif Keita album, which is called Sorrow. And we listened to the track called Sina Sumbuya. And this had this very sort of distinctive 80s sound, particularly on the horns and the drums, actually absolutely glistening with digital reverb. But actually his voice just kind of cuts through, just so powerful. And it's a great album, actually. I didn't have it. And this came out on the Stearns label, which was a UK sort of African label, I guess.
Yeah, and shop. There was a shop at the top of near Euston, which was the only shop where you could buy African records.
That's right.
Which was a crucial thing. I think I started reminiscing about that time and thinking about friends who worked for Island Records when Mango made a second or third Usunador album. So then picked out the Bob Marley Dreams of Freedom, which is a version of his classic stuff redone by Bill Laswell, really. Obviously, sometimes Laswell's things work and sometimes they don't, but on the first, basically on this album, it kind of all came together, really. And played, what did I play? I can't remember what I played.
3 O'Clock Roadblock.
3 O'Clock Roadblock, which is Rebel Music.
Rebel Music,
reworked. And it's fantastic. Epic, huge sound as well. And does sound great on the vinyl.
For some reason, whenever I hear it, I'm just imagining hearing it at the sort of morning at a huge festival.
Yeah, it does have that.
It just has that
sound.
spacious sound. Yeah. We moved on, we stayed with the reggae vibes and moved on to a Lee Perry produced album by Jar Lion called Columbia Collie, and his take on the Abyssinian Sata Masagana, just called Sata. This is a great album.
Yeah.
For those of you who want to continue your Lee Perry journey, I really recommend this album. Every track's a winner, and versioning some kind of classic rhythms.
Really was good. I remember seeing that around, but I never bought that record, actually. I'm hearing good things about the new Lee Perry album, which is interesting. Staying with a reggae thing and staying with a dubbish side of things, although this is not really a traditional dub album in any sense. This was the kind of dub version of Burning Spear's Marcus Garvey record, which I guess is a classic, kind of absolute classic roots reggae record, and played the ghost of this version. And this is a stripped down version, not a lot of effects actually, so it almost sounds more like an instrumental album rather than a traditional dub album, but with all the usual favourites. Rabbi Shakespeare, as he's called on this one, as opposed to Robbie Shakespeare. And always been a big Burning Spear fan.
Yeah, and it had a very unusual kind of heavily compressed and distorted dry bass sound.
Yeah.
Very unusual sounding album. I really liked it actually. I don't know that. But,
classic.
Yeah, so drum and bass. Well, we moved away from reggae but stayed with a sort of strongly drum and bass connected piece, and this is the Michael Wyckoff Looking Up to You 7-inch that I picked up recently, I think from the Crazy Beat Records. And this, of course, was sampled as Hey Mr. DJ by Jarnay, but I have to say the original is just fantastic. Sort of weirdly kind of reminds me of two different eras. It reminded me of that sort of early 90s kind of R&B sound when everyone started sampling music from the, I guess it's...
Late 70s.
Late 70s, yeah. Great track. Michael Wyckoff.
He was a keyboard player, I think.
Was he?
He kind of disappeared off the face of the earth.
Right.
He was around a lot. And then staying with a slightly later era, I guess, actually. This is probably early 80s, if anything. South Soul Orchestra featuring Loretta Holloway, Runaway, which is just a classic track. I mean, with a great kind of extended kind of vibe solo at the end of it. People
really
always think disco's kind of dumb music, but it really wasn't dumb music, actually. And this was a reissue on Ramshorn, which was a Dutch label that reissued a lot of the South Soul stuff in the late 80s, I think. But a great tune anyway, Runaway. Absolutely
fantastic. Absolutely. Loretta Holloway, yeah. So I was watching a documentary about black cinema last week with my mum, which is quite an unusual thing to be doing. Anyway, it was a two-parter, and part one featured a bit all about this film called Claudine, which I have to say I'd never heard of. And I'd certainly never heard of the soundtrack, which was by Gladys Knight and the Pips. And it's another Curtis Mayfield production from, I think, about 1975. And we listened to a fantastic track, very kind of gospel-infused track called Hold On. And again, I just sort of really discovering Gladys Knight. I think for some reason I just never really went there. But what a fantastic singer. And also the Pips, you know, the male harmonies around her voice, really fantastic. A great production. So, and you picked this up very, very cheap.
Yeah, definitely great stuff. That was one of the highlights of the session, I think. You never need much of an excuse to play Curtis, so I had some immediately with Mark playing the Gladys Knight track. And this is kind of studying the kind of really part of the very strong run of Curtis albums, but one that doesn't get as much attention as some of the other ones. This is There's No Place Like America Today, with play the track called Billy Jack, which is incredibly stripped down. Amazing kind of sound to it. I mean, no bass, I don't think, actually.
It's a little bit of bass.
Tiny bit of bass.
But beautiful kind of, there's sort of three guitar parts that just melding together. Absolutely fantastic. Really
good one. Kind of slightly more, I'm not sure this one's been reissued as many times as the first 4 or 5, but it's definitely worth picking up if you can get it.
And staying with number 3 in the run of Curtis Mayfield Productions, another soundtrack, and this time the film Sparkle, and music by Aretha Franklin. And we listened to again, a bit of an epic track, giving him something he can feel. Absolutely fantastic. Again, you know, when Aretha died, a lot of her sort of 70s work seems to be quite overlooked or not talked about. There's some amazing music, and this is definitely a great album.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and again, a fantastic production.
Staying with the same area, but not with a Curtis production, Margie Joseph, who was... did 3 or 4 records on Atlantic, which are good actually. I mean, they're not kind of as startling as some of Aretha's stuff and some of the other singers, but she was a really good singer and produced by Arif Madan, and played the track Just As Soon As the Feeling's Over, which is written by Sam Dees, who's a bit of a kind of hero on the kind of indie soul scene. Good record, this one actually. Very easy to find. Pick up anywhere really.
Recently rediscovered this album, which I'd had several years ago, by Mayer Hawthorne, who I think made a run of 2 or 3 albums on the Stones Throw label, and it's all original tracks apart from a soul cover called Maybe So, Maybe No, which I hadn't really appreciated was a cover version until I actually picked up the original on a 7-inch, but also a great version on this album. So Mayor Hawthorne's A Strange Arrangement.
Then went for Marvin, which is always very easy to do as well. But this is the CD double special 40th anniversary, I think it was, reissue of Trouble Man, which is great because it's got all of the cues, as well as having the original album really nicely done, it's got all the cues from the film as well, and there's some absolutely treasures in here. And you suddenly realise we all know Marvin's a wonderful singer and a wonderful songwriter. But what a great musician he was as well. I mean, he arranged all this stuff on here and wrote and stuff. And a really nice package, actually. If you still do buy CDs, this is really worth picking up. Unfortunately, now it seems to be getting very, very pricey. It includes sleep notes by Joni Mitchell, which is quite interesting.
And a fantastic version of T Plays It Cool.
T Plays It Cool.
There seems to be quite a few versions on that.
Versions, yeah.
What a tune that is.
Definitely worth picking up. I guess it couldn't come on vinyl because it was about 5 albums, so it would be rather expensive.
Another new acquisition in the last month is this album, which I think is the second album from Henri Texier, called Varech, and features his bass playing and oud and flute, bombard, and basically it's all just him, his voice, his instrumentation. And we listened to a track called L'Éléphant, track 3. Nice. Yeah, it was just a bit very different actually from what we'd been listening to up until then. But yeah, really nice. Still making very good music now. He on the label Bleu, I think it's called, French label. He's done some really nice stuff on there as well, do some soundtracks. Then we went a bit ECM, but also staying a little bit with that kind of African influence, and played the track Togo off this album Old and New Dreams, which was a band with Don Cherry, Dewey Redman, Charlie Hayden and Ed Blackwell. So it's basically like Ornette's quartet, but with Dewey Redman instead of Ornette. And the track Togo is kind of almost like a drum solo with some horn heads in the middle of it, really, as well. And they made two records that all came out almost at the same time. One on ECM, one on Black Saint, and then made a couple more on Black Saint as well. But it's I saw this band live actually; they were great. Can't really go wrong with those guys. No, fantastic drumming I thought on that track. Wow, this is a very disturbing cover. Really weird. Which somebody must have thought was a good idea. Absolutely. Well. This is Johnny Harris and the album Movements. And Johnny Harris was a conductor and arranger who did a lot of work with the BBC in the 60s and used to work on sort of the big sort of music shows like sort of Lulu and Cliff Richard. I kind of came across this because I'd become aware of the original version of Light My Fire, which apparently inspired Shirley Bassey, which we played at a session. Which we have played at a session not so long ago. This is the original version. There's a few sort of covers, but unusual covers. Give Peace a Chance, Wichita Lineman, Paint It Black, and we actually listened to an original soundtrack called Fragments of Fear. Just that very weird sort of lounge, slightly experimental early 70s, beautifully recorded music. And again, just really sort of like the sound of this. I love the sort of dynamics and the sweep of strings and a sort of full orchestra getting involved. Really nice. Did cost you a lot of money? Didn't cost me a lot of money. And then we went for Frank Sinatra. I don't know where he came from. I think it was the sound of the orchestra actually. And this is from the Concert Sinatra, which is him working with Nelson Riddle, but rather than working with a big band, working with a full symphony orchestra basically, and played the track Lost in the Stars, which has always been one of my favourite songs actually. And there's lots of stuff on about here about how this was recorded, and it was I think it was a kind of reference recording of its time, which was the early 60s. Yeah, so Frank, which I think I got this for about 50 pence, I think. At the record fair in Whitstable. In Whitstable, yeah. Ah. Well, this album is Live It Up by the Isley Brothers and brings together two of our obsession faves in the guise of the Isley Brothers and Todd Rundgren. So the Isley Brothers covering the Todd track Hello It's Me. Again, we keep going on. No one else seems to ever show the Isley Brothers, but you're missing out, guys. And we're going to keep on until you do. Yes, indeed. But yeah, always a few fantastic tracks on each of their albums. You've just got to get over the dress sense, and then it's fine. But yeah, Live It Up.
I think this one trumps it on dress sense. Actually. This is real interesting garb on this one. This is from a slightly later album called Showdown, and played the track called Groove With You, which has been sampled on a number of hip-hop songs as well. Again, great stuff. Interesting clothing.
Very interesting.
What else could you more want? Yeah, and their stuff's so ripe for sampling. It's not surprising that so much of their stuff has ended up on hip hop records. Really.
Yeah, we were sort of beginning to wind down the session, so time to listen to The Undisputed Truth. This is the first Norman Whitfield production. The album's called Face to Face with the Truth, and we listened to an incredibly minimal version of what's going on, with some lovely guitar work, very, very minimal guitar work from Dennis Coffey. Just almost nothing happening, actually.
Well, he was kind of playing that whole arrangement on the guitar as well.
Yeah.
Arpeggiated.
Just great. I think. I mean, I'm a big fan of The Undisputed Truth. I think this is probably the best album.
That's classic.
First one.
Yeah. So staying with that kind of soul vibe in the same similar period, going for another incredible producer. In fact, he doesn't produce this one, he arranges this record. It's Charles Stepney, who worked a lot on the Cadet and Chess labels. This is a vocal group called the Dells, who are just fantastic, who we played, I think, before at sessions.
Many times.
Well. And a version of, another epic version of The White Shade of Pale, in this case, the Purple Harem song. These are easy to find, actually, the Dells records, and they're all good, actually. They all have at least 3 or 4 fantastic tracks on them. Amazingly powerful. Kind of almost like a Baroque, as Mart said, almost like a Baroque soul kind of production sound, but with this incredibly raw vocal on top of it as well. It just works very well.
Talking of raw vocals, this is the Gene Clark solo album called White Light that has... I think it's just been re-released. Anyway, this is a white vinyl version. This is a very stripped down singer-songwriter album, and we listened, and obviously Gene Clark of X of the Birds, who's the other album that I love of his is No Other, which John turned me on to.
Fantastic record.
Something very kind of haunting and melancholy about his songs and his singing, and we listened to a track called 1 in 100.
I actually bought the wrong... I'm quite a big Lamb Chop fan. I think I've probably played them or showed them at sessions before. And I bought the wrong... I meant to bring a new one with me. I bought, in fact, an old one called Damage, which is a great record. So it was a good excuse to play the track short. I mean, they're kind of like an interesting variant on the kind of the Nashville machine, really. I mean, obviously it's an image they've stoked quite a lot over the years, but they're kind of, I think, a really good band, interesting songs, great dynamic. And the new one's really fascinating, which is called, I can't remember what it's called actually, but it uses a vocoder on it, which is quite weird actually. And so it's not like a all country thing at all. Okay,
a brand new release here. This is from the Jamie Saft Quartet. Lovely gatefold vinyl, fantastic beard being modelled by Jamie Saft himself here. This is Bill McHenry on tenor sax, Nashit Waits on drums, Bradley Christopher Jones on acoustic bass. I think all analogue recording, so this is definitely one that's worth picking up on vinyl as a new record on Rare Noise Records. Sort of kind of quite mellow, but then quite experimental and really sort of, going interesting places with the music. Beautifully recorded, lovely playing, fantastic sort of listening and interplay. We listened to the first track on side 1, which is called Vessels.
Jamie Saft, of course, is a regular with John Zorn.
Yeah.
Played with John Zorn for years and years and years and years and years. And this is the funny story behind this record. This is a Yusef Lateef record called Gentle Giant, which is one of his run of Atlantic records. And I had this on CD for a long time, and I'd been trying to buy his autobiography, which is also called The Gentle Giant. And I finally located a copy of it. It's quite an expensive academic book, and ordered it, and they said it's on the way, and then when it arrived it was a record. A book. So anyway, this is a great record from that run. Possibly not the best of the Atlantic ones, and played the track called Nubian Lady, which is a very laid back, a lot of flute playing on this record as well. But yeah, Yusef, you can't really go wrong with Yusef again.
Beautiful. So last record was basically inspired by seeing a gig. There's a new venue here in our town called the Hot Tin, and a very unusual triple bill of women artists, women musicians. Rosina, Emily Levianes Farouche and Shida Shahabi all did solo sets, working sort of with treated piano and, in Rosina's case, looped cello. And this was an EP. I think they were all commissioned to write pieces that were sort of inspired by the sea. And this EP is called The Sea at the End of Her String. And then we're sort of doing a short tour around the UK. And anyway, that was an absolutely amazing gig. And we listened to Shida Shahabi, who I think is French-Iranian. They're all pretty young women, but super talented and just making beautiful music. And we listened to the track called Flora.
Which is very nice, actually.
Yeah, John was really like this.
Yeah.
This is on Fat Cat Records, and this is a limited edition EP, but I think they've all also got solo albums as well. So just sort of ended the session rather sweetly.
Yeah, very nice sound.
So that's it.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Peace
Keep commenting.
Yeah.
I will leave the link to the radio show, although at the moment we're not on air, but there are about 37 two-hour shows that you can listen to on the Mixcloud channel if you like the sorts of selections we share here. And we'll see you next time.
And keep calm in these strange times, I think.
Absolutely.
I think everyone's having a weird time at the moment, so
yeah.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Everybody. Take care.